Welcome to the Tales from Travellers podcast, a show that aims to share the unique experiences of expats, travellers, and those who've chosen to make a life abroad. Through our guests' unique experiences, we'll explore the challenges and rewards of adjusting to a new culture, making new connections, pursuing a career, or even raising a family in a different part of the world. Whether you're a seasoned traveller or new to the expat lifestyle, this podcast could be an insightful tool or just a fun piece to distract you while you're making your journey. In today's episode, I'm joined by an old friend and fellow traveller who went out with me to Wenzhou, become an expat teacher and kind of experience the joys of rural life, but also stayed a lot longer and then moved on to a career in full-time teaching. So today I'm joined by Patrick, or as we like to call you, Paddy. Could you tell me whereabouts in the world are you right now?
I'm currently working in Egypt in an international school in Alexandria.
One of the things that really made me want to reach out and have this kind of chat with you on the podcast is that out of all the kind of the group of ours that we went out to for China, it was a lot of our first times, a lot of our first years, and a few members of the team have gone on to various different careers, roles. Some have stayed in China as TEFL teachers, and I believe one or two of you have gone on to do PGCEs and education as a full-time role. But before we dive heavily into where you're at now and the PGCE and becoming a teacher, let's start in chapter one. What brought about the urge to go to China and become a TEFL teacher? How did that end up on your lap?
Well, I always had an underlying desire to work and live in a different country. And I think especially one as exotic as China, which we feel, very little about in the Western world, right? And just before I left, I recently did a master's degree, and I couldn't find the job that I wanted to do regarding that, which was renewable energy. And then someone gave me a ring randomly and said, "Do you want to come and teach in China?" And obviously, I just put the phone down straight away because, I mean, who wants to do that, right? But then after musing on it for a few months, I decided to bring them back or contact them again, and probably had the easiest job interview I've ever had. I don't know what yours was like, but it was about a half an hour chat on the phone, and then they were like, "Oh yeah, you can come out."
Yeah, mine was exactly the same. I think I exactly the same experience. Random person call me up and then, yeah, have you thought about this? Yeah, sure, why not? And then, as you said, easiest job interview. It seemed almost too easy
Mm.
to the point that I thought there had to be a con.
Well, many of you did think it was a con, didn't you? I don't think I ever thought it was a con, but
Yeah, I didn't think about kidding.
we didn't have much contact with each other until just before we left, did we? When we set up a WhatsApp group.
No, I think we had to go through a whole sign off, GDPR. We had to go through and say, are we happy to share our phone numbers and contact details, which hopefully we all did since we'll be spending a year together. But yeah, I think we had a WhatsApp group which we used sporadically for about a week before we all met for the first time at the airport.
Yeah, I remember. I do think it was one of the best decisions I've made, though, to do this, to go to China.
Was teaching always an option for you, or was it something again that you wanted to go traveling and then this opportunity as a TEFL teacher just happened to
It was
coincide?
more about the traveling for me. I never wanted to be a teacher.
I think that's how it starts for a lot of teachers, actually. Obviously, the big thing you mentioned, not we don't tend to know too much about, say, especially the rural side of China. But how did you initially find the culture shock? I know a lot of us experience it in various different ways. Obviously, besides the language barrier, but what was your first, initial, experience with culture shock and Wenzhou, the rural side of China where we were in?
Well, I think we were quite lucky in that we all, a lot of us came out together. I think if there had been less of us or you came alone, it would be a lot more difficult to make that transition. Um, but I did find, the Chinese people to be very, very welcoming. So that was made it a lot easier. I mean, what else did you ask then? Again, what were the biggest challenges?
Yeah, so you've got obviously big challenges coming with the culture shock.
Hmm.
Kind of a two-part question on this one. What was kind of the first big hurdle that you remember overcoming? And part two of it, in advance of knowing there would be culture shock with China, did you do much prep before leaving?
No, I don't think so. I don't even think I knew how to say ni hao before I went, or which is interesting. Um, I have written down. I did think of a few things. There was three. I think there's three things in particular which are the big challenges when you go. When I went to China, which is so. First one will probably be the food, right? And food is different all over. So
Mm.
that's what something you always encounter as an expat. I think is getting used to the food in your particular country or wherever you go. I mean, you do get a lot of American westernized food everywhere, so you will always have that option. But in general, you need to get used to what they eat. So that would be one thing, and I think it took me a long time, really, actually, to get used to the food in China because it is so different in general. And it took me a few years before I started to love certain dishes. I remember I didn't even start liking hot pot till like a couple of months before I left because I went to Chengdu, which is one of the main areas for one of the main originators of the dish, and I really loved it there. The second thing would be the language barrier in China because a lot of people do not speak English there. Um, so I think learning some Mandarin is essential to get by. Um, so I got lessons with one of our colleagues, Matt, which was good. Very interesting man to do it with. Eventually learned a good level, a good basic conversational level of Mandarin, which was very useful to me, especially considering I was there for 4 years. So it was a lot more useful to me than to you, to Greg. But um,
Yeah.
and it's essential for practical things. I mean, like getting things fixed. You know, like these things you wouldn't really think about. Like maybe you have a problem with your bike and you need to get it fixed. You know, you need to just go to a local store and ask them and stuff like that. You know, so you don't want to be having to get help every time. You need
Mm.
to do something very basic like that. You know.
So you mentioned about learning the language, experiencing the food. You also, obviously, you were there for 4 years, Wenzhou, and I believe you also went to teach in Ningbo,
Hmm.
Ningbo,
Hmm.
and obviously both times as a teacher. What was the driving force behind moving from Wenzhou to Ningbo? Was it purely just to experience more of China, or is this when you started to want to have more of a challenge in your work travel life as well?
More of a challenge. I wouldn't say it changed that much, to be honest. I was obviously I went there alone, like you say. I didn't really know anyone there before I went,
Mm.
so I had to make new friends and all these kinds of things. Get used to the new city. But Ningbo was in general a nicer city than Wenzhou, so I find it a bit easier to settle in. And I don't seem to have any problems finding new friends in new places. I had obviously the same experience coming to Egypt here, uh, and it's usually pretty easy to find friends as an expat. You know, you there's a limited amount of you, so you sort of band together, and it's usually pretty easy to find people who are like-minded, and you
Mm.
just hang out with the other teachers, so it's pretty easy. Um, what's not as easy is really making friends with the locals. You know, um, it would take you
Yeah.
it would take you time to find people local people who have the same interests as you. I was going to say third big challenge though as well would be related to that actually, which is sort of penetrating the culture of the country you're going to. So this depends on your personality a bit, I think, because I think about some of our friends from before. So I just mentioned Matt, right? And we have another friend who we went out with called Joe, and they
Mm.
both are now married. Have a, well, actually, Matt, not so much, right? Matt's back in England, isn't he? Is he still in England now?
Richard's still out there.
Richard,
Richard's
well, yeah,
married with a child, and Joe's also married and just had
yeah.
a kid.
So
Yeah,
you think about those two, and I'm thinking like how I wonder how like involved in the culture they feel now. Because for me, I really dislike the feeling of not being part of the general culture. You know, you think about things like reacting to news, to trends, to um, cultural entertainment, and you know how important that is to us back in the UK. I think to someone like you as well, it's very important. You know, um, and I always thought
yeah.
that was something I really disliked is not feeling part of that, and it's a very difficult barrier to overcome. I think.
Definitely. I mean that's quite an interesting topic, and it's again it's something I kind of I've touched upon with someone who's like went to Europe. Is that whole being an expat, being an alien, and you're missing out on what everyone else finds
Mm,
normal. And again, I think with you and me, we were
mm,
quite pop culture geeks. We enjoyed watching our films, and I think even when it comes to play like China in particular, so many things are heavily regulated by the government. What is allowed in, what isn't. Even platforms down to WeChat, whether or not they do it is how they um, keep an overview on everything and the people. Obviously, it is quite an interest, and everyone I've spoken to says something similar, where it's like you come back after a year, you come back after 2 years, and you feel so out of touch with something so simple as you noticed a shop has just opened or something's closed down.
After 4 years, I really felt like I was starting to feel detached from British culture, which I didn't like as well. And there was also the sense of
Yeah,
the things that the Chinese people were interested in were what we saw always just seemed a bit shallow. And I don't know if you felt that way, but certain things like their social media interests, I guess we have the same. A lot of people have the same shallow interests here, but yeah, there was that feeling as well, and just a bit tacky. I don't know the best word. This sounds a bit insulting to the Chinese, but they are a sort of they have this strange mix of the very old ancient culture of China, which is thousands of years old, and this new culture, which is very superficial and shallow. So
mm.
yeah, there's that as well.
I agree. When you look at again their main platform, WeChat, or even just down to the things around, everything is very kind of super. It's almost what you probably call over here as people living through social media, very Instagrammable.
Hmm.
But they do have this very intriguing mix of the old and new when it comes to respecting elders, how certain traditions are still upheld and practiced daily. I mean, there was tea making classes that would happen alongside a computer class.
I think I'm certain there is a lot of very cultured and intelligent uh, people in China. I met them as well, but yeah, it's just.
It's same thing you'd find living in England as well. You could walk down the street and see so many different people from so many different backgrounds and how they live. But I think in China and especially in Wenzhou in particular, if you were to go to like one of the malls versus just down the road, you've got one of their little temples, you could find, obviously the Buddhist monks going about their weekend ritual. Then you walk down the road and you see a couple of, teenagers literally just glued to their phone. So it's almost much more of a contrast than what you see back in England and the UK.
And they are extremely academic as well, aren't they? So
Yeah.
you'd imagine them to be very smart, very very intellectual people, and they are as well.
When it comes to us doing the teaching out there, I was teaching in the primary school and you were teaching in the secondary school. Speaking again with, like, say, Steph, for example, who worked in the same in a year group down from me, we kind of found ourselves trying to be the best teachers we could be, but also finding ourselves as a little bit more of a kind of glorified marketing tool, and maybe, you know, the lesser priority of the classes, kind of almost understandably, were brought in short-term contracts. How did you find teaching in the secondary school? What was your perception of being a teacher there?
Still very well. I felt very well respected. I think in the school we were at together, I was still middle school, so I was just like the bit of entertainment for the week. To be honest, that was very much that kind of feeling. But when I went to Ningbo, I felt like a proper teacher. I was marking homework, I was giving exams, and I was teaching proper classes. So that was a good evolution for me as a teacher, um, which made the next natural step for me to go back and get a proper teaching degree, PGCE, the natural step for me. So that's what I did.
What was the journey from obviously being a TEFL teacher to then deciding and applying for your PGCE?
Well, I did teach. I was teaching some science and physics at the school in China already. So it was already the TEFL angle was sort of going away, because it was an international department
Yeah.
of a school. But yeah, I applied from China, which was actually a very fortunate time to do it, because they said because of COVID they did all their interviews online, whereas normally they would do them in person, and they would never be able to apply from a different country like I did. So I was actually very, very fortunate in the
Yeah.
way it panned out, and was able to get on the course at Bristol University, which turned out to be an excellent place to do it, I think.
With the PGCE, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a year-long course, isn't it?
That's right, yes. Worked at two different schools in the UK
Yeah.
during it, yeah.
And with that, obviously working back in the UK, studying for your PGCE, did you think to yourself from then that you wanted to go abroad again, or working and studying back in the UK, did it make you think, all right, I'm going to apply for UK schools?
Uh, I think it was probably about this time last year that I decided I wanted to go abroad again. I don't think my experiences of the English schools, I didn't enjoy the atmosphere, and I looked at my colleagues. I remember vividly looking at my colleagues and not feeling envy of their lives. Basically, they just looked incredibly stressed. I guess they all had families as well, which sort of contributes to it. So they never really got a break. They would come into school and it's stress, and they would go home and it'd be quite stressful as well. Um, so things like that. Yeah, the weather was difficult to adjust to. I mean, it's just so dark in the UK. It's so dark, and it does affect me. Um, And then you had the general situation in the UK with the bills, just the idea of I wouldn't be making any money if I was there. I don't think I'm making much money here either, but the cost of living is definitely far lower. Um, so I can go on holidays and trips and stuff like that, quite easily here, which is nice. I think I get more time. I get more time off here as well.
Oh, right, okay, because you're working in an English school, so it follows a British curriculum, and is it a similar timetable, or do you work by kind of an Egyptian school standards?
So it's a bit mixed. I think sometimes they have to follow the Egyptian opening times. Like they delayed the beginning of school, the opening of school by 2 weeks because the other ones hadn't opened. But that just means they ended up adding 15 minutes to the end of every day to make up for it, which was a bit annoying. Um,
Yeah.
but we seem to have slightly more holidays. I'm not sure why than a UK school. So I have 3 weeks off at Easter rather than just two, and I have basically almost 2 months off in the summer. So rather than six
Nice.
weeks, right? Which normally 6 weeks, I would say. So it's pretty good. Um,
Yeah. How did Egypt end up being the country that you want to stay in? How did you end up finding that job and choosing Egypt?
well, you only need one website to find teacher jobs, which is TES, TES, and everything's advertised on there, all jobs pretty much all across the world. You need to be, I guess, properly qualified to apply for them, but yeah, you have a variety, and you can tell if the job's going to be ECT friendly as well, which means is it going to be early career teacher friendly? Because when you first
Mm.
qualify, you need to do 2 years of ECT, which is like what NQT used to be. Which
Yeah.
unless you complete that, you don't get to keep your QTS, your qualified teaching status. So I'm about 1 year into that now, or almost. So you need to go to a school that
Mm.
will provide that service.
Was Egypt just a job opening that came up that was ECT
Yeah.
friendly, or
Yeah.
did
So,
you?
well, the main reason, I guess, is just, yeah, again, I think it's that exotic feeling which appealed to me, I think. And yeah, just the idea of going to a completely different culture, experiencing what it's like is very interesting to me, you know. I think it's, I think it's interesting to anyone, but I think a lot of the people I told when I was going to Egypt, they thought, you know, it was a bit of a wild decision, you know. I think a lot of people are scared to go to places like this. Yeah, it's been really fun. I think the weather has been great. I think organizationally, it's about where you'd expect it to be, which is not great. Um, but and the economy here has gone. I mean, it's bad everywhere, isn't it? But it's gone particularly bad here. So if you think about how much an English pound is worth here, it's probably gone up by a third since I've been here. So from I used to get 20 Egyptian pounds to £1, and now I get 30 something to £1. So the inflation here is like huge. It's really bad.
Mm.
But yeah, I think the opportunity here to travel is immense, right? I mean, I've already been to the pyramids. Um, I told you earlier I'm going to go on a Nile cruise this week, and I've been to a place called Dahab near Sharm el Sheikh already, which is a nice like resort desert area. So and then it's easy to travel around in the region as well. I mean, I could go to various Middle Eastern countries, Turkey, places like this if quite easily if I wanted to.
When you got the job for Egypt, obviously when we were going out to China, we had accommodation, we had phones, we had pretty much everything set up for us by the time we got out there. What was it like setting up for obviously a fully qualified teaching role? Did the school help you find accommodation, or was that something everything you had to sort out from food, accommodation, phone, internet? Was that all in your hands, or did you have a Linda?
No, they sort it all out for you. Yeah. I unfortunately do not have a Linda though,
Oh,
but yeah,
oh
you get a HR
that's a shame.
person, yeah, for sure. Uh, Ours was more like a cafe than a Linda, I would put her, so a bit more competent.
Oh, all
So, yeah.
right.
But yeah, again, that stuff gets sorted out for you. So I have quite a nice apartment. I mean, I really dislike the decor of the toilet and the kitchen, but apart from that, it's quite nice. Um, yes, phone, internet, those things get sorted out for you. That's something you might want to consider when you're moving abroad. Internet is never as good as back home, so you might struggle with things like that. Online gaming can be quite difficult because they tend to block these things. So something to consider, I guess, if you really like doing that. But there's ways around it.
There's always a way around it, and the thing that I think we all tended to love while we were in China was the wonderful thing of a VPN.
Yeah.
Um, alongside that, I'm assuming a VPN is something that you heavily rely on, especially as a teacher, so that you can gain access to all the resources you could need. Are there any other tools or apps or resources that you found as a traveler over China and Egypt that are 100% a necessity?
I did. Yeah. Let me think. Okay. Yeah, I did think of some things. I would say certain apps that you use in these countries. So I find when I went to China and when I came here, certain apps become essential, like the food delivery app, whatever's most common there. A translation app could be very helpful, although I've not really used that here actually. Um, an Amazon equivalent. So in China, it was Taobao, right? Um,
Yep.
Then I would say sort of learning how to count and ask and say basic things, but I mean that's pretty obvious. I would say something you want to do before you go. Oh, this is not related to skills, I guess, but is do your homework on the school and make sure it's not in a location which is so remote, because I think there are some in China, especially, which are so remote and away from a civilized a big city that you pretty much like a hermit equivalent, but and you're just relying on whoever's at the school to be your friend. You know what I mean? So I've heard of people who stories like that anyway. You know, um,
The one thing I think we all, when we went out to China, is none of us really knew what was going on. It was almost an excuse for us to just go traveling. Everyone came out there with almost this: I want to learn the language, I want to pick up this skill, I want to do this, I want to do that. The work and the schooling was almost secondary, and it's then we kind of quickly realized. I think when we all got off the plane in Wenzhou and we were in the taxi ride for an hour, how far away and how rural our location was. And I think that's one thing that took us all by surprise, not just the fact how rural it was, but that sense of scope and size of China really, really hit everyone. We were driving through two mountains to get to our apartment building, but it's also quite difficult to even find with some schools that I've found. It's quite difficult to find schools that you'd be working at as a TEFL teacher online. When you were moving from Wenzhou to Ningbo, did you apply for schools in Ningbo based on just because of Ningbo? Or was there because there were job openings through a recruiter, or did you use a website equivalent to TES?
I used a recruiter, I believe, through WeChat, and
Mm.
again, my school there was probably even more remote than my one in Wenzhou. So, or our one in Wenzhou. So
Mm.
but really liked that school, to be fair. So it wasn't a big deal, it was sort of in the middle. So I had to have a bus journey to school, a quite lengthy bus journey to school in the mornings. Um, but I still lived in a part of the city which is on the outskirts of Ningbo. So, it was actually more remote than in Wenzhou. Um, but it turned out
Mm.
okay in the end. It was fine. Um,
And what about where you're at now? Are you in a bit more of a city kind of area, or are you a bit more on the outskirts with some other expats?
yeah, I'm right in the middle of.
Oh. Is there what is the social life like? Obviously, you're going out there kind of initially we wanted to experience the culture, you wanted to explore, see the world. What is the social kind of side of things like for you?
It's it's less exciting than you might imagine. I think the because of the reality. So one of the big things about coming to Egypt or any Middle Eastern country is the relationship they have with alcohol, which is they don't have one. Um, when that is a big culture shock for anyone coming from the UK. Just the idea that you can't buy alcohol in every shop or every restaurant. Here, you can only buy it in specific restaurants and specific dedicated alcohol shops. So at first, I think it was a bit took a bit of getting used to for me, but now I got used to it. I found enough places I know I can go to and have a drink. Um, we actually have a local here, like a local pub, but it's not a
Mm.
pub; it's a church. So the only place you can buy alcohol around here is at the church because it's Christian. So that's really funny. But it's a lovely little area because they have this lovely little courtyard you can sit in and just drink your beer. So it's pretty good. But yeah, I know enough restaurants, bars now, um, and then some of the young people still will drink. So they're not so devout here, I think, as some of the other Middle Eastern countries about not drinking. I think in places like Kuwait,
Mm.
uh, you cannot even buy alcohol at all anyway. You have to bring it in, or it's on the black market or something like that. So I'm just glad I didn't go somewhere like that, to be honest. Uh, so that yeah,
Well,
so what tends
yeah.
to happen though is there's not so many places to go out. I think Cairo probably there's a lot more, but Alexandria is quite limited in what you can do and who you can see. So the sort of nightlife and things like that are a bit less exciting. Let's put it that way.
Do you tend to find yourself going out and just kind of exploring on a bait on like, or have you just become so accustomed to where you are now that it just feels like you're in your local town?
Mm, mm. I'd say the latter, only because
Yeah.
it's very difficult to just walk around the city, and I think it's very difficult to walk around. Like it's difficult to walk around Cairo as well. They're very busy, very car dominated, and their pavements and their infrastructure are just not suited for walking at all. They barely have any road crossings you can use, so you sort of have to play Frogger when you're crossing the road to get in between the cars, um, which is not that fun. But yeah, and you can imagine what they're driving is like. It's insane. Things like that. Yeah, I'm actually in probably the most wealthy area of the city at the moment. So you have a lot of like nice restaurants around here and Western food. Um, and it's all within about 5 minutes of my school as well. So my journey to school is only about 5 minute walk. I think the only park in the city is here
Mm.
as well, from what I can tell. Um, so it's like, yeah, there's not much need to leave this sort of local area most of the time. maybe to go for a drink or something, you might just go somewhere else because there's not many bars here. But yeah.
Other expats and other teachers, are they kind of in a do you find any of them are settling in for the long term, or do you find a lot of them are on, say, termly contracts and people are here just to experience it similar to you? Or are there some expat, fully qualified teachers who are like, no, Egypt's the goal?
Mm.
Have a lot of people settled down?
Most are on the termly contracts, like one yearly contracts. There are, but contrary to China, I think there are quite a few here who've been here a while and are very experienced, very good teachers. My boss is a very good teacher. She's head of science, and she's extremely good, very experienced. And then there's a couple of others at the school who are very experienced, which is a good thing to have, because without them, you feel like the school would fall apart. Um, but yeah, on the whole, mostly you get these sort of like the mercenary type of teacher like me, I think, who are younger and probably just looking to travel and experience different things. But
Are a lot of them from England and like the UK, or do you find quite international coming as well? Do you have many Americans and from mainland Europe coming over to teach there?
here not particularly, because it's a British school, so they specifically target British teachers. I don't think there are many foreigners here at all. But in China, it was definitely a big mix, especially there's the other schools that I went to. I know ours, we just had us British people, but I think in general they target a mixture of people. I had a really good American friend at the last school, a really good Irish friend. There was a Canadian there as well. So you do get that mixture. I know Joel's girlfriend's South African, right?
Mm,
Um, so you do get a really good mix,
yeah,
actually. I think in different uh, in different schools across the world. Depends if it's called a British school, you're gonna find mainly British teachers, right? If it's called an American school, you'd probably mainly
yeah.
find American, but with the odd other one. But if it's more general, you'll get a mix, I find.
Talking about kind of all these different schools and teaching from where you've been, you worked in several schools. Obviously, studying for the PGCE, so you get that taste of what it's like to work in a full teaching environment on a professional standard. Did you find any sort of, let's just say, culture shock or career shock working in the school you're at now, as opposed to obviously the schools you worked at in England? Did you find were things so different that it was noticeable, or did you just find yourself in a kind of that kind of autopilot of teaching?
No, this school here, it feels very similar to working in a British school back home. The way things are done, they try to do it exactly the same way. Same rules, same procedures. Make sure you have proper safeguarding, for example. Make sure you have proper behavior policies. It all feels very, very similar to back home, and they try to run it the same way. And so you don't get such a shock with the sort of way things are run. It's very familiar.
Yeah.
It's only in China where it was quite different, wasn't it? It was more the Chinese system. It was the Chinese way of doing things, wasn't it? Really.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, the way that it was teaching there was a lot of, and they also kind of, suppose, took a lot of influence. Or the school we were in Wenzhou took a bit of influence from the American education system and how they kind of laid out their day. The school, it was all quite influenced by the Americans, but yeah, you find yourself kind of adapting to it. And I think you obviously, was it similar in Ningbo? Actually, was what kind of set was that?
Um, Ningbo, yeah, American influenced again. But obviously, you would still get the Chinese what to say, not traditions, but for example, at lunchtime they would always have a nap, right? Or they'd have an extended lunch.
Oh yeah,
So these kind of customs
yeah.
would not be interrupted for anything, which is I used to love that though. Going to sleep at lunch, that's great. If you needed it, you know.
Yeah, see, I remember myself kind of being so confused by the napping and the sleeping, but I think once after 6 months being there, especially the heat when it got to the warmer months, you couldn't help but sleep because you were just so exhausted from the day and just sweating your ass off all day.
Hmm.
That having a nap was the only logical thing to do.
No, I wish they introduced
But
it back home. To be honest, I think it's good for you. I actually went.
give it time, they might.
I went for a nap one time when I was in the British school, and I got caught, and they were like, "Naughty, naughty." And like, oh, if I got caught doing that, I would have been fired. I was like, whatever, mate. So I was actually tired. You know, what is the big deal? If you got nothing to do and you're tired, why can't you just have a little nap on your desk? You know?
I think again, you pick up certain customs and certain elements of that the culture that you tend to find really works, and you almost, and I think we were doing the same. Like there are certain members of the group who are almost trying to kind of get that push and that influence of the Western kind of system and working ethics, and almost trying to bring that across to the school we were in. But when some things work, and you can't understand why it's not accepted globally. But that's why we travel, I suppose.
Hmm. It was an adjustment period for me, I think, because I just come back from China. I was used to having that nap, but now I would never think of doing it actually because I've not been doing it for so long. It's one of those things, you do pick up
Mm.
on the way things are done in that country, and then you have to adjust back to your country or a different country. So it's one of those things.
Kind of speaking of the adjustment, how you've come around, where you're at now, and you kind of put yourself down saying you're one of these mercenary teachers. Are there any other countries that you're thinking about going? Is Egypt going to be a bit longer, do you think, or could you find yourself moving a bit more around the Middle East, perhaps mainland Europe to teach, or even going further east again? Or do you think you might be a case of coming back UK side?
Yeah, I've been considering this quite heavily recently because I was supposed to re-sign with my school this week, and I still haven't done so. So I'm still very much on the fence at the moment. I would prefer to stay just to, I think, teachers. 1 year is just not enough. And it's a bit unfair on the children, when you leave after 1 year. I think, children really require consistency. So it's better if I did stay. But saying that, there's kids here are extremely difficult to work with. Can be very rude, very disrespectful. I think it's cultural. I don't think it's particularly a school problem because we constantly punish them, but they just continue to be this way. And I think it is cultural, just like the problems we have back home are cultural. But unlike back home, if
Mm.
you're in a private school there, you will get a majority hardworking students because there's a sort of competition culture, isn't there? But here, there doesn't seem to have that. It just seems to be, uh, you know, who's cool. We don't care about these things. They just don't have that academic sense to them. Anyway, so
Yeah.
yeah, I'm looking at where else I could go. I would. I'm not crazy about going back to Asia, but it, it is tempting as well. I think I would like to go somewhere in Europe, possibly somewhere else in Europe, maybe Spain or whatever. I should start
Yeah.
applying soon, so I'll see what comes up. Um, But yeah, Southeast Asia is a possibility. I think Thailand or Vietnam or something. They generally seem to have a few jobs going. But like I said, they need to be suitable for ECTs. So I need to take that into consideration. So that's where I'd be
Yeah.
looking. I think I wouldn't want to stay in the Middle East because I think, like I said, the sort of culture of these kids, I think it's normal around here, and it's not really to my tastes. I'd probably prefer to work in the UK, honestly. I think if you could get a nice school in the
What
UK,
compared to working in the Middle East?
yeah, it'd be preferable. Yeah. The problem is obviously UK is very expensive, so not well paying. So, but at least I'd be back with family, I
Yeah,
guess.
and I think that's always obviously. But obviously, you say that you quite enjoy traveling. You've obviously you've worked in China for 4 years. Been in Egypt since September. Um, do you during say like the winter break or even like the term breaks that you have in Egypt, do you did you tend to find yourself wanting to come home, or did you tend to want to take that time and just explore again and continue traveling?
Uh, Christmas, I came home because I think Christmas is
Mm.
great back home. So I do still like stay in contact with my family often. It's not like I don't want to be near them or my friends back home. I do always enjoy seeing them and going back home. So it's not like that. It's just yeah. I think at Easter I've got a 3 week period. I'm not going to go back then either. Um, I'm going to go traveling. Yeah. So uh, certain times I probably like to go back. I think going back twice a year is enough.
Do you still have a little checklist of places of the tourist, let's say the tourist traps of Egypt? Are you working your way through them, or do you find yourself kind of settling in? As you mentioned, it's your local town now, but do you tend to find much how some New Yorkers will tend to forget about the Statue of Liberty being such a tourist trap and quite a sight? Are you at that point now in Egypt and where you're living that what would astonish many tourists is just another thing for you, or are you still kind of captivated by the that wanderlust vibe of being in Egypt?
No, I'm still got the wanderlust. I think actually I only saw the main sites of Alexandria about 3 days ago. So it took me this long. I mean, 6 months, not 6 months, is it? 5 months until I actually went to see the main tourist attractions here, which is interesting. But I have seen, like I said, I went to the pyramids almost straight away. So something like that, which is so obvious, you got to go straight away. But yeah, there's still a lot of places I would like to see here. There's a lot of stuff, good, great stuff in Egypt. Um, there's the white and black desert where you can go out very deep into the desert. It's like they've got these unique formations there. But I think also part of the attraction is you can see like a completely light pollution free sky out there, which apparently is really really good. So I would like to go there. I would like to go to Siwa as well. Siwa is apparently one of the most beautiful places to go. A sort of desert oasis city, town. Sorry. So I'd like to go there as well. Um, other than that, I've been. I should be checking quite a few things off my list by then. Port Said, I think, is very good as well. Apparently, so yeah, it's more of the wanderlust still for sure. Um, I think
Yeah.
the same thing in China. I managed to see quite a lot of China when I was there, but still there were a couple of things I never saw. Just before I left, even though I traveled the most of the places I wanted to see, northwest, west, south. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah. The wanderlust, the sites are fantastic, but I think with a lot of those things, and especially for people who are looking to travel for their first time or even take a job abroad, um, would what moments from say China and obviously in Egypt pushed you far out of your comfort zone? Would you say?
Um, Pushed me out my comfort zone. I'm not sure. In what way do you mean?
For one, we when we all bought our e-bikes in China, that was obviously quite a thing. I've never, I drive a car. I've never been on a say a motorized bike to the extent of that. So doing my first trip on a battery operated bike was, might not seem so drastic, but there's always that fear of running out of battery in the middle of nowhere, pushing your bike to the limits. But then with that, the nerve of going to a separate mall and maybe even ordering my first meal without anyone there to correct me if I'm wrong. So for me, the comfort zone that I kind of pushed myself out from was that, as you mentioned, that kind of hermitness. And once you realize that you can do things on your own, was probably that initial that was the main comfort thing for me. I got out of that sense of having to rely, not rely, but having that comfort of someone else around.
Hmm.
And I think a few of us kind of found that as well. In particular, I know Prince. He was always quite a fan of exploring and doing a lot of things, so he jumped out of that really quick. And when I was talking to Steph, it was even just down to the simple things of having, the wanting to buy certain foods that you wouldn't be comfortable doing yourself. So did you find anything that kind of pushed you out of that? It's almost finding that you're not just someone who lives in an apartment. You got so comfortable going out on your own. Did you have any of those experiences that once you conquered that fear,
In China,
you could handle
yeah.
anything?
I mean, I remember asking Steph, how do I order some noodles? From the noodle man.
Yeah.
And that was like a couple of weeks. That was like a month after we'd been there. I mean, I still hadn't sort of like made that leap to just go and order some noodles from the noodle man downstairs. So, uh, y- yeah, it will take a while when you first get to these places to do, like you say, to get out of your comfort zone, I guess. But that's something that's interesting as well. I mean, you think when you go to these countries, you'll be out of your comfort zone all the time, don't you? I think people imagine it being like that. Whereas
Mm.
actually, your day to day life is not that different, really, is it? You go home and you watch Netflix and, you know, do these normal things still. You're not constantly,
Yeah.
in a foreign place feeling worried or scared. Yeah, you know. So if anyone's worried about,
Yeah.
those
No.
kind of things, don't worry about it. Most of the time you can be quite comfortable still, and life doesn't seem that different or that exciting. It's just occasionally, well, you notice it. You probably notice it. The only difference is sort of like maybe during your trip to school, you'll commute, right? You'll probably be like, "Oh, I'm in a different country." You kind of remember, you know. Um,
Yeah.
or then on the weekends, maybe when you go out, and it just, to be honest, it just makes everything a little bit more interesting. Really, it makes your life a bit more interesting. The fact that you are somewhere where people speak a different language, or you don't know quite what's going to happen, or what the customs are going to be about what you're doing. Um, yeah, I mean, I think for me, I've always had other people around as well. Still, I think, well, there's always been other foreigners around I could do things with, and there's always people always want to hang out. So
Mm.
it's fine. I think I know of certain people who, for example, went to China almost completely alone as a foreigner, and were forced to learn the language and communicate with them because they had no one else to speak to. Like I know of people like that,
Yeah.
which I think is a different level of getting out of your comfort zone. I don't think I've ever been on that level, so nothing really stands out to me. Yeah, so
I've got a few last questions. These ones are a bit more kind of subtle, so don't worry too much about them. But these are always quite interesting ones that I tend that when I was asking people who haven't been traveling, these are just a few things that come to their mind. So, in the initial piece, we'll go through them. What advice would you give young Patrick who hasn't been out traveling for the first time? What advice would you give him?
uh, I don't think so. Really, I mean, I think I was fine. I think I did the right things. I mean, yeah, I mean, as advice to people who are going, I mean, make sure you try and live life to the fullest. Go on trips, go on nights out, meet people, meet women or men if that's what you're interested in. Visit the restaurants, see the sights, see the countryside, do all these things. Make sure you live it to the fullest. If you're so inclined, get married to a local woman, have a child with them, and completely change your life.
Well, we know a few who are going through down that wonderful journey. Was there an item that you took with you that you just could not live without?
I think noise cancelling headphones are pretty good for your plane rides. I think that's a pretty good one. Um,
No.
Nothing in particular, really. I mean, I like playing on consoles and stuff, don't I? So I bought a Nintendo
Mm.
Switch soon after I went to China because I didn't have anything else to play. So I usually like to have that just to relax with. A lot of these countries don't have central heating, so you might want to invest in a heater. I got one on right now. Um, yeah, I can't think of much else. I think just you usually
And
you have to buy like everything you need once you get there, don't you? Like all these essential domestic goods
yeah,
you need to
you
survive.
do end up kind of realizing all the things you've forgotten.
Yeah, which is pretty
Yeah,
annoying having to
the
buy them
basic
again.
comforts and luxuries. Do you have a song on your playlist that always plays when you're out traveling?
Mm, no, nothing in particular. I would say. uh, I usually listen to new newish music or playlists. I have certain playlists, so it would probably be. But I like to make new playlists all the time, so it's never the same thing.
New science, new sounds, new playlist. I
Hmm.
like that.
Hmm.
You're going on a cruise while you're out on half term. You're kind of thinking about potentially going to Europe. Do you have any countries that are next on your list that you want to, you know, maybe just explore, experience, maybe even move to? But where's next on the world map?
Well, I want to go and visit the US again at some point. Certainly not
Oh,
work there though.
nice.
The USA.
And any particular part of it, or are you just looking to go across?
I'd like to go across. That would be really good, but that would be a big trip. I do have a friend in New York at the moment.
Yeah,
I'd like to go and see, but I've never been to Western US either, so I'd like to go there. It's California and all that.
yeah.
But that's just for my
Well,
travel.
that would always be nice. Good weather for you.
Yeah, it'd just be from a travel point of view. I wouldn't want to work in the US. Sounds like a bloody nightmare.
Uh, no, I can't blame you. I can't imagine anything like that. I'd like to do myself.
Hmm.
But so I've got just one last question for you, Patrick, and I really appreciate your time. Um, would you say, as a teacher, now that you've got your PGCE, would you say that taking a TEFL job and working abroad, not so much just traveling it, would you say that's a good life decision that kind of will influence next steps in life?
I think it was definitely a good decision. I think like depends what you want out of your life. If you want a stable home life, it's not a good option, you know, because you're going to be moving about a
Mm.
lot. I would like to settle down at some point, so I need to find a job that I like, a place that I can stay for an extended period. I would prefer that, but you also need to find someone to spend that time with, so or to settle down with. So that needs to happen first. Um, but as a young person, I think it's a great choice because it gives you such incredible opportunities to travel and to meet new people. You really open your mind to new cultures, new languages, new ways of thinking, um, and it's been amazing for me. So I don't regret decision at all.
I 100% agree. I mean, I obviously haven't lived the expat life as long as you, but it's definitely something that it helps a lot, and especially if you're kind of maybe as a lot of us lot who went out in a position where you kind of didn't know what was coming naturally in your life, you didn't know which direction you're heading. It's almost a great place to kind of gather your thoughts and kind of take stock of everything, figure out what you want out of life and which way you want to go down. And for a lot of the group that we went out with, people have obviously gone on to travel more. They come back to the UK to work. Obviously, as we mentioned, a few members of the group um, have now got married. They've had children, and they're living out there, and that's where they live now. And some are still exploring China, various parts of it, and kind of just enjoying the city life. And although it might not be a long-term commitment for them, it's almost just become a home for them. So yeah, it's definitely an experience someone should undertake.
I find it interesting that you're still attached to the expat life in some way by making this podcast. But I know podcasting is your interest. But yeah, is this something you'd like to
Yeah,
see develop into more your podcasting?
potentially, yeah. I mean, the whole driving force
The
behind
next
this really was I'd
the next Lex Friedman, you are.
be the next Joe Rogan. I do love traveling. I love experiencing cultures. I love learning about different countries and languages. I think it's so fascinating. And with some of the jobs that I've had since working in China, I've always had that kind of connection with kind of various locations, schools, and cultures and people. And there's it's always interesting talking about it. But even like I've got members of of my family who are living, in different countries all over the world. So there's always that connection with kind of not staying at the nest, I suppose. And even when people look at their own family, you find out that people who might think they're all English, they're not. I mean, I've got um, doing some of those DNA tests and even speaking to immediate family. I've got I suppose family that can be traced back to Denmark, even just like a couple of generations ago. I've got families coming from Eastern Europe, and it's quite fascinating. And even I think that's it might not be cooked into everyone's like blood and gene, but yeah, I think the expat life is exciting, and if you want to experience it, go for it. And as you said, when you're young, do it. And I think that this podcast is almost my way of living vicariously through the people I talk
Mm.
to as well. I'm sampling your essence of the wanderlust. Again, Patrick, I'd like to say thank you so much for coming on board and sharing your story. And it's been really interesting, and it's been great catching up with you again. So I just want to say thank you, and well,
Yep.
happy travels with everything.
No problem. It's been a pleasure, Greg. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining us today. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the Tales from Travellers podcast to stay up to date on past and future episodes. I'm always looking to share new stories from expats and repats from all over the world, so please reach out if you'd like to share your story. You never know, your story could be the one that helps someone make that life-changing choice. You can find us on Instagram at Tales from Travellers. I'd love to hear your story, and more importantly, I'd love to share it with the world. I look forward to hearing from you, but thanks again for joining me, and until next time, happy travels.